I'm ready.
Okay, let's call such order. I have no idea what time it is. I'm in a different time zone.
I got 7:09.
Okay, 7:09. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation. This is a particular one is a Zoom meeting. The phone number for the Zoom is 646-558-8656. The meeting ID for this is 952-6512-9515. And finally, the passcode is 352421. Just so that everyone can put them on their calendars, the annual and special town meeting for this spring is going to be held as our previous annual town meeting is going to be held on Saturday, May 22nd, 2021. And warrant articles for this will be due on February 12th. The town election is Monday, May 3rd. The town election has not been moved, so now the town election is going to be before the annual town meeting. Nomination papers are available from the town clerk, and the papers with signatures are due back by March 15th. For announcements of what's going on in the town, if you haven't subscribed already, go to wnewbury.org/subscribe. And I'll add one that is written here. There again, this coming month, February, there are some great programs that can be taken advantage of, put on by the library. So I suggest you go to the library website and try and take advantage of those. First item on the agenda is some upcoming news about the town's planning in relation to vaccine clinics that the town is probably going to be hosting. Angus, you want to give us a quick rundown on those?
Sure, and I believe we've got Paul on the line as well, but I'll just say.
Oh, okay. I can't see who's online.
Sure.
Okay.
So he's been hard at work with some regional efforts. As you know, the Newbury Port got started a couple of weeks ago with vaccinating a vaccination clinic that was in partnership with West Newbury, and there's anticipated upcoming clinics with Newbury Port as kind of the lead administrative sponsor, if you will. As you know, West Newbury is also approved as a vaccination provider, as is Amesbury in this region. So there's additional regional collaboration ongoing with the expectation that Amesbury would host one or more clinics, and also the potential that West Newbury would host one or more clinics on its own with its own authorization. Paul's been working closely with my office and the town accountant on working through some of the administrative aspects of this, of initial costs, how those would be funded. FEMA just announced late last week that we do expect full reimbursement for costs incurred related to vaccination clinics. So we're working with some of the communities in the region, especially, for instance, if a different community hosted, but some of our staff or, public health nurse or, whether we incurred costs to support the the running of a clinic in another community, how those charges would be handled, whether those would be cross-invoiced between municipalities, or whether we would all just independently seek FEMA reimbursement. So we're expecting there's going to be a meeting later this week among the finance staff in the 8 communities participating with the Amesbury region to help to work through some of those questions, as well as questions related to billing of insurance and who would do that and who's eligible to do that, and who's not. So that's just, there's a lot of moving parts, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of work going on and a lot of complexity to it. But Paul and his team are really on the front line. So Paul, if you're on, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I say pretty much everything, agree with everything Angus said. Things are moving fast. We're heading in the right direction. We're just waiting for vaccine to be rolled out. Most of the state's vaccine has been allotted to the state's mega vaccine sites as well as the pharmacies. So local boards of health, even though we're ready to stand up a clinic, we're not receiving much vaccine. So we're trying to get through that hurdle as well. But I think we're going to know a lot more by the end of this week. And then next week, we should be have a clear shot as to where we're going, where we're heading, and what to expect.
Question, Angus, on the cost aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like until the cost is incurred, we can't, is there a pool of money that we can use? Or like, do we have money that, like, how does that work? Because I know we can't spend money out of different line items. Would it have to come out of like the Board of Health expense or Selectmen's expense account or something like that? How is that all going to work? Because we didn't budget anything like that. I know we're going to get reimbursed, but legally, where can we take it from? And we can't give money out until those things were incurred, right?
You're exactly right, Glenn, and that's exactly some of the complexity that we're trying to work through. Is even if there's an expectation of full reimbursement by FEMA, you still need to assign those costs to some expense line, at the time they're incurred, and really you can't legally incur expenses without some upfront agreement. Small things, it's not like you have a contract to go buy, supplies at the, Staples or whatever. But to incur any kind of significant costs, you need to have a contract up front to tie those subsequent invoices to. So those are just exactly some of the issues we're working on. Part of that, obviously you're aware, we got some CARES Act funding in the late fall, but that was based on projections of a whole host of either known or potential expenses, none of which included vaccination clinics. So we've been working to pin down exactly what those costs have been incurred and to see if there's anything extra. And it does seem like there's going to be some extra. We had entered a contract with Pentucket in the mid-fall for their purchase of some supplies related to, HEPA filters and air filters, that kind of thing. And we just got the documentation from them today that what they expended was less than what we had agreed. So that leaves some money that we had received that isn't spoken for. But on the other hand, there have been more requests that have come in recent weeks for things like iPads and some equipment that wasn't part of the CARES initial projection. So we're having to kind of really reconcile what was projected, what was received versus what's actually been expended and what's now projected with the clinics. So, one option would be to charge the expenses to the CARES Act line. Another would be to seek a reserve fund transfer, which, as is, exactly for this kind of thing. Unbudgeted expenses that come up during the year that would require finance committee approval. Nothing has yet been filed with them, but I think there's a good chance that some amount of funding would be proposed there.
How much are we looking at? Because we still have only halfway through the year on that too. Right. I mean, so how much do we have in there?
Well, at the beginning of the year, they budget $60,000. They did approve one reserve fund transfer in the fall. So it's down to about $53,000 remaining. And as you know, there's some other variables totally unrelated to COVID that may still come down the road before the end of June. So
correct.
It's been very hard to get an estimate of.
That's the reason
costs.
reason why I asked that question, because that money might need to be used for other things.
Right. Yeah. Stephanie and I have asked, help to come up with some estimates of what it might cost out of pocket, even for a single clinic, never mind multiple clinics, just so we have some some number to talk about. We don't yet have a number, but I know they're working on that, and they know that to go to FinCom with a reserve fund transfer, obviously FinCom's going to look for some kind of backup on, what's the proposed expense and, what's the basis of that. So, but my office hasn't been provided anything, and I'd be hesitant to come up with my own estimate because I'm not the one actually organizing the clinic. But that work is in process. I think it's fair to say.
Okay.
But
Hey, Paul, what are you hearing on the street about vaccines? You hearing anything like from local board of health or anything like when they're going to be able to be available to the local towns like ours? And I won't hold you to it. I'm just curious if you're hearing anything.
Well, the state's limiting, I had requested 975 doses of Pfizer, and I didn't get any response. I got a response Saturday that we should hear about it Monday, and I'm checking my email again now, and I have not heard that we get that vaccine. They're only giving 100 doses per community, Moderna, and that's what they're capping at. But I went for the gold and asked for the 975 of the Pfizer because that's the minimum you can get of the Pfizer. So
And is that
like I said, most of that
first shot? Is that first shot stuff, or is that so you would have to cut that in half? So if they gave
basically whatever vaccine you get from the state, the federal government holds that allotment back. So if we get 200 doses, that's their first shot, and then the federal government automatically holds it back, and they ship it out to us a week prior to the scheduled clinic. So like I said, we're getting 8 towns involved in this regional approach, so all the towns are working together. So like the biggest thing is the state's giving all their vaccines to these mega sites because these mega sites have appointments booked 2 weeks out. So they got to have this vaccine guaranteed for these mega sites as well as these pharmacists or pharmacies like CVS and Walgreens. So the boards of health are getting the short end of the stick. But I know that there's going to be a lot of discussion this week between the finance, town managers, administrators, and the mayors this week. So I think by Friday, we're going to have a better solid answer of, what's going on money-wise. And then I think also the mayors may be putting some pressure on the state as to, you want us to have a regional approach for vaccinations, and we're getting one stood up and we can't get vaccines. So I think that's going to be going out there shortly from some of the mayors.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, one thing that I think would be helpful to really emphasize, and I think Paul touched on this, but maybe to just elaborate a little more. We've done a lot of work with outreach, including with the Council on Aging, the surveys that were sent, many hundreds of surveys, and those have been coming back. Just in today's mail, we had just by appearance probably 100, and I talked to Teresa earlier today, and she just input about 175 into her database. So we're getting a lot of input back. We're putting that into a database. We have people's contact information so that when the time comes, we can proactively notify people that they're, get them signed up, because the clinics, obviously, they're not walk-in things. You have to have a spot registered, and it's very, very important that none of the vaccine goes to waste so that you fill all those spots. But I think it's important to emphasize that we don't know if or when we're going to get the vaccines. We know we're eligible because we've got that approval from the state back in early January. But Paul, if you could just speak to the lead time, because I think that might help people out in the community who may think that, who may not understand. It could be a matter of days between actually knowing we're going to get the vaccine and actually running a clinic. Could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the state puts out a survey on Monday morning. We have to have it to the state by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and basically we got to put in vaccine requests for the following week, and also put in, the information as to what we used for vaccine the previous week and how much we have on hold, because the state does not want people to receive vaccine and not distribute it within 10 days. So basically it works is if you get notice on Friday that you're receiving vaccine, the vaccine gets delivered on Monday. If you get notice on Monday that you're receiving vaccine, it gets delivered on Wednesday. So again, if we're holding clinics on weekends, we get the vaccine on Monday or Wednesday. We can't really or should not post the clinic with time slots until we physically have the vaccine in hand. So we would have to only, like I said, 2-3 day lead time.
How are you
out
storing
once we
it?
get the vaccine.
How are you storing it?
Well, once we get the vaccine, then we get agreements with the hospitals to store the vaccine, to keep it in the
Okay.
proper temperature range. We get a whole team of people who just strictly on managing the vaccine once it comes to us. So
It does
there's
it
a
does
lot
work.
of moving parts.
It does work like that because at my work, we had a meeting on Monday and was announced, hey, we're not sure when we're going to get it. On Tuesday morning at a 9:30 meeting, we're getting vaccinated that Thursday. So it really
That's
does go that
exactly the
fast.
point I wanted to get across, Glenn. That's a great example because
That's what
yeah.
happened at our work. I mean, literally on Monday's meeting, he had no clue.
Right. So I want people to have confidence that when they send in, for instance, those surveys, those are getting entered. We are, tracking all that information, but they may not hear from us or from someone from the town until we actually know we're going to get the vaccine and can offer them an actual opening. So so I understand people's frustration out in the community and out across the Commonwealth and across the country. I think there's a lot of, frustration for good reason, but at least here in West Newbury, I want people to have confidence that when they give us information, that is being handled right away. But we just don't know when we're going to get the vaccine, and when we do find out, it might be, as Paul said, with just a couple of days advance notice that the clinic is actually going to take place.
Oh, any further questions or comments on that? So, Angus, where would be the best place for people to, if they are having questions, so that you don't get a million phone calls? Where do you think the best place to look for that info would be?
Well, we put timely updates on the town website. And so, for instance, late last week, Paul became aware there were some openings through some regional clinics unrelated to direct work that we're doing. So those were put out promptly on the site. That's a great resource to just keep an eye on the website and the Facebook feed. You could call the health agent, although I'll say he's super busy. So when there's information, especially if you're a resident out there who's already returned your survey, it's not, the follow-up calls aren't really going to help. It's not going to make us get the vaccine any sooner. And it's not going to have us have specific information any sooner. So there is some amount of kind of waiting and allowing the staff time that we do have to be used, productively. So, I mean, people can always call and can always email, but I just want people to know that when we have new information, it's going to be sent out. And the most efficient way for us to do that by far is through the website and social media. I know that's not everyone's favorite, method of communication, but that's no question our best return on investment in terms of staff time. We can put something out, and so we would encourage people to keep an eye on that. But if people turned in a survey and if they're eligible and an opening, it's going to all be taken up in order. But people would get a phone call to get scheduled. We have a number of volunteers as well as staff who have picked up some of that work and taken responsibility for helping to put actual specific people in touch with actual openings and clinics when the time comes.
Thanks. That's good.
Paul, does that cover it from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it was well said. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Next item on the agenda is extend the appointment of Jen Pepper on the Cultural Council. Initially, we had voted it just to the 2021 because we didn't know the actual term of this particular seat on the Cultural Council. But I would make a motion to extend the appointment of that to June 30th, 2023.
Second,
Further discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Camper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is a request for a support letter from the Essex County Trails Association. The Essex County Trails Association is applying for a grant from the Commonwealth. This grant would assist the Essex County Trails Organization in doing an evaluation of the trails on, in this particular case, in West Newbury, but other towns, but we only care about West Newbury, obviously, and there would be no actual physical work done to the trail, but there would be any problems, things that needed to be worked on would be organized using GPS, and ultimately by categorizing the things that needed work and maintenance that needed to be done to the trails. This would allow perhaps in the future for the trails, the actual work to be done, and perhaps also some of that could be funded through grants as well. So we this was a pretty short notice we got on this, but there would be no actual cost to the town. Essex County Trails Association are going to be doing the evaluations themselves, so there is no cost to the town. And if we approve this, I guess we'll be sending this out for them tonight, because the deadline is 11:59 tonight.
That's right. And I think we've got Brad Bashir on. I see Groundwork Lawrence, so I assume that's you, Brad. Just to be clear, so this is two grants that we're kind of indirectly part of going to Mass Trails. One on behalf of the Open Space Committee with the All Access Trail for Mill Pond, and secondly, the letter of support for the ECTA grant. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, Angus, that is correct.
Great, thanks.
Does that need our signatures, or can you just sign it?
Well, so what I would suggest, if the board is favorable toward this, then I would recommend that your motion authorize me to sign on the board's behalf. That way I can just sign it and send it tonight, which is kind of the game plan.
So moved.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Just brief thing in terms of further discussion, as the board knows, but while Brad's on, and just want to make sure everyone is aware. So we did get a grant recently, just in the last month, for through the Mass Office of Disability, and that's for a townwide assessment of facilities, accessibility, compliance, and looking for opportunities for improvement. So I haven't signed the contract with the vendor yet. I just got a draft late last week, and I want to really go through that because I want to make sure, and the building inspector, we want to make sure that to the extent that grant has some funding, that the scope would include looking at least some of the trails, not with the expectation that things are 100% accessible. That's not the standard, but that there's reasonable accommodation. So we do want to take advantage of that separate grant to help look at accessibility, or whether there's areas where, we might be able to make some improvements with some limited, or with investment that's available. So where there's some, I don't know about overlap, but it at least seems like that's, kind of in concert with what ECTA's trying to do. So let's just, make sure we have open communication on that.
Okay, our next item is we just want to look over a letter to the Mass Department of Transportation requesting pedestrian crossing signals on Main Street. And so these would be warning lights at the crossing at the Page School down, going down to Pipestave, and also in front of the new high school. So I guess I need to know, I'm just curious about the process. So we're writing to the Department of Transportation about this. So how does this get on? If it's not something that they were interested in, how do we, I understand our legislators can, Letty Muir, Bruce Carr can help us with this, but how do we make Mass DOT interested in this? I guess that's the question.
Hey, Wayne, I
we
think,
write them a letter, but do they care?
Wayne, you might want to start from the beginning, so, unless you want me to.
No, I could just mention that, we were approached by a resident who's actually a Mass Highway employee, but he's not going to make.
He works for DOT.
He works.
Oh, okay.
He works
I
for
didn't know
DOT.
that. Okay.
But he's not going to be able to make a decision on this. It's not his job. But he is a resident of town, and he was concerned with these couple locations where we have unique crossings in front of schools, crossing 113. So we had a small little meeting, and Glenn was there, and Lenny Mira also showed up, and Jeff Durant also showed up, and we just talked about those crosswalks. And Lenny's suggestion was that we write to the state and ask for them to fund this improvement. It's not a lot of money. It's not like it's major construction. It's minor traffic signal work. I think I estimated it out at $38,000, but it is on a state road. So I think, me personally, I think the state should fund it and build it. It is on their road, and it is a street it's our highest volume street in town. So it's interesting because both crosswalks are not typical crosswalk locations. They're on a state highway, but they're not really at rail intersections. They're at driveway approaches. So, I understand, if you're a driver, all of a sudden this crosswalk just pops out of nowhere to you. There's no light there. There's no traffic light. So, they are challenges to cross there. So,
we had somebody hit down in front of the high school, middle school.
Yes. So the chief told us we met in December, I believe, or sometime in November, and he said there was a crash in front of the school where a student was hit. And I guess I didn't pull all the reports out there. I mean, the state could also get those reports, but I heard from a lot of other people that there has been missed crashes over the years on 113 at both the Page School and the high school.
So the light's going to be, or what we're shooting for, would they be flashing lights all the time, or would they be push button lights that that turn red if you push the button?
So they're only flashing yellow lights. They installed one on Story Ave where the Children's Healthcare is. If you in Newburyport, it's a light that stays black until you come up to it. Once you press the button, it starts to flash yellow. So it warns the driver that there's somebody in the crosswalk, and per the state law, you should yield to them. So it's not a red light. You don't press the button, you get a yellow, then a red, and then you cross the street. It's a warning light that tells the driver that somebody's in the crosswalk. So if you're approaching the crosswalk and it's safe to do so as a driver, you're supposed to stop and yield to the pedestrian that's in the crosswalk. It's not a bad invention. I think the problem is you got speeds of Main Street that are 35 miles an hour posted, but we know the speeds could be a little bit higher than that. So when you're traveling at 43 miles an hour and you're not paying attention, and then you look up and you see somebody, off to the side, they tend not to slam on the brakes and stop. Flashing light allows the pedestrian to give the driver a warning 300, 400 feet, 500 feet in advance, which is better than just a miscellaneous pedestrian sitting on the sidewalk or on the side of the sidewalk waiting for somebody to see them there. The light is the traffic light is on both sides of the street, and it will flash in the LED form where the lights are actually designed to be, I believe, 8 feet off the ground. So it's in the driver's eye, where a traffic signal is a minimum of 13.7 up in the sky. So it's a new thing that's been out for like 12, 14 years now, and we don't have any in town yet. Newburyport, I believe, has 2.
Wayne, do you know anything about the, you pretty much described it, but do you know anything about the efficacy of these kind of lights? You think it's a good idea? You think they work?
I was in the development of this design probably around 18 years ago when the designer came to Cambridge when I was there, and we studied his design. And then the feds thought it was a great idea and took the design and ran with it. It's not a traffic signal, so it doesn't go to yellow to red and stops. It doesn't come to a complete
right.
stop. It's a flashing yellow light that's only activated when you activate the light. So it's a warning device. I like it on a state road like Main Street, for example, because I think if we have a red light, if we have a full traffic signal on Main Street that sits in green 24 hours a day, and then once in a great while during school, someone hits the button and it turns red, a driver is so used to seeing that light green that they drive right through the red. So that's one thing nice about these lights. They're black all the time until somebody presses it. So it stands out. There's studies out there that shows the effectiveness of 87%, 93%, whatever the percentage was. I did studies back in 2003, 2004, 2005. And I think we were seeing like 90% when we originally installed the light. And then 6 months later, it went down to like 75%. But again, no one got hit or struck. It just means the yielding rate was at 75% or 90%. The pedestrians still could wait for the vehicles to stop on both sides and then they cross. So it's a nice middle of the road type of, it's better than a full traffic signal because you don't have the negative part of having a light sit in green all the time. And I like it because to have nothing there, especially at the Page School, there's a lot going on at the Page School. We have 3 driveways up on a crest of a hill. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
And we put in a couple of these up in the last town I worked up in Hamden. And I remember one of the issues was, these were existing crosswalks, but they were non-compliant. They didn't have they weren't fully compliant in terms of ADA. So in installing the new ones, they obviously had to be brought into full compliance. And you had mentioned, earlier in your remarks that the location of these intersections kind of come into driveways, and they're not locations where you would typically see a crosswalk begin or end. So in terms of the actual, kind of fine tuning the design, do you think the crosswalk locations with the existing driveways can be made to work? Or do you think that when Mass DOT digs into this, or if they dig into it, that they'd find potentially larger roadway changes needed in order to accommodate crosswalks that are actually fully compliant?
I think the high school's already compliant. They got the wheelchair ramps that were installed 4 or 5 years ago at the correct location. So the high school would be in compliance right from the install. The Page School would be, there's no sidewalk on either side of the Page School. So the crosswalk at the Page School is not in compliance. So MassDOT would have to have a design there. And that's why in the letter I did say that, the traffic light that we're looking to install would have to meet Mass Highway standards. Obviously, if Mass Highway is installing it, they would figure out what the standard is. But I would say that they do need to designate a sidewalk location there, and however they do something like that, I'm not sure what they would require there. I would like them to take the lead on this because they have to meet their requirements on a state road, obviously, than us trying to find what their methods are out there. Page School's been there for a long time, my own opinion, and it should have been fixed 30 years ago, and now we're asking them to fix it. So I really think that they should come up to bat and try to save this one individual location. We're not asking for a sidewalk for 8,000 feet on Main Street. We'd love to see one, but we're not asking for that right now. We're asking to improve a location at a school, and I think it's worth us reaching out to them.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion on that?
So we need to move to send a letter essentially to request.
Yeah, normally this isn't something we'd necessarily bring to the board, but where it was initiated and a board member was part of it right from the start. And, this might play out over an extended period. Who knows? Maybe we'll get to it quickly. But anyhow, we just want to make sure before we send it that it is representative of the board's wishes in this regard.
Okay, so I move that we send the draft letter to the MassDOT Highway Administrator requesting the flashing lights as discussed to be installed at the Page School and the middle school, high school campus.
Second.
All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Wayne.
Wayne also has, I think it's not next, but it's maybe the item after that on the CPA funds for the old town hall. So if you wouldn't mind, Archie, if we could jump to that, just so he can
Yes,
get back
that's
to
fine.
his snow operations. So this is, you had already, the Board of Selectmen had already voted back in December to support the submittal of a CPA application, which is important, obviously, as the landowner for the Old Town Hall. But now that the complete application is prepared and, Wayne's had some more time to work up the details, working with, cost estimating and so forth. You have the complete application in front of you. And as you know, the CPC looks for the endorsement of the landowner, or in this case, the selectman on behalf of the town. So I wanted to make sure that before they take it up later this month, that we could say that the application as proposed has the full support of the Board of Selectmen, or if it doesn't, that you let us know that so adjustments could be made.
I think we just do a motion to move on, right, for this?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
full
so
support.
I would move that we submit a request to CPC for funding to pay for the painting and additional exterior work on the town hall.
Well, Wayne's submitting it, right? And we're just making sure that we're in support of it because we're the quote
Okay,
unquote.
good point, Glenn. So,
Yeah, landowners.
yeah, okay, so I guess.
So
rephrasing that.
as the landowners or the stewards of the town hall, I make a motion that we're in full support with the article Wayne's going to be proposing to the CPC.
A second.
All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Terrific.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Go have fun.
Thank you, buddy.
Hey, and part of your job description isn't going out and cleaning Angus's car off.
He's okay today.
I know, it looks like he's home anyways. It looked like a funny joke.
Have a good night, guys.
See you later.
Good night.
Thanks. So
Any-
I guess, just to speak, so there, shouldn't be any surprises on the schedule. I'll present my proposed budget at the March 1st Selectmen's meeting. And I've been working with,
Are we back on?
Sorry about that. Yeah, Wayne's back on, so.
Now, does he have to stay there or just keep it on, then he'll
No,
come back
he doesn't
later?
need to. He can just,
Yeah.
can leave and it'll automatically
Okay.
end when the meeting's.
All set.
Yeah, make sure that he's that it's charged. I mean, that he has it plugged in, not running on
it should be
battery.
plugged in.
Wayne, thanks. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks, Wayne. Sorry for the miscue there. So I did meet with Greg LeBrecq over at the school and with the finance director of Merrimack earlier today to talk about the Pawtucket budget. And he didn't give us numbers, but it does look like obviously we know the debt service is going to go up quite a bit with the school override, but it looks like the operating budget impacts may be quite minimal. if any, because of the formula with the three-town formula. Those operating budget increases, and there are some, it looks like are going to fall most heavily on Groveland and Merrimack, and may be negligible in West Newbury. And he suggested there might even be a decrease in the operating budget in the school because of the funding formula, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, I've been
But
working.
good.
It would be good. I felt a little bit sheepish at the meeting as the Merrimack finance director was saying, she couldn't, the increases they're talking about for Merrimack and Groveland are pretty substantial and would actually require an override. So I felt a little bit sheepish being the.
Well, we got it in years too. It's
Yeah.
You can't
the
get there.
pendulum swings for sure.
Yeah, exactly. You can't get there from here when you try to figure that formula out. But for a lot of years, we got the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, we're the smallest part of that. We don't even get full votes for our school committee members.
Yeah, good point, Glenn.
So I've been working with individual department heads. DPW has already submitted its budget. Police and dispatch is going to be a little challenging because without the union contract settled, I don't have any reason to expect those are going to be settled this month. So there will be some question mark when I present that budget on March 1st. Some of the other larger departments, I know the library board is going to meet next Tuesday to vote their recommended budget for FY22. So I will say the process to this point has been, I think it's been fine, but it's been more piecemeal than prior years just because of all of the workload issues with COVID and staff turnover and so forth. So we've been scrambling every day, and there's just limited bandwidth, but you have all the dates in front of you. And I think that the later town meeting with the May 22nd date, knock on wood, I think it's going to work out well because we'll have fewer moving parts. For instance, I'll have my health insurance assessment the middle of this month in February. So by the time I present my budget, I'll already have, some of those bigger numbers. I'll already know, what they are instead of having those be question marks. So we got our Essex Regional Retirement Assessment, and we're working on apportioning that between town and water. So I've been, meeting with Stephanie a couple of times a week on budget, and there are a couple of departments that need some close attention. I mean, it all needs close attention, but I think I think we'll be in good shape to make the overall proposal a month from tonight.
Okay, great.
So I do want to say on the issue of the town meeting warrant closing, as the board's aware, we've had a couple of article requests come in from individuals in town, and I just want to make sure people understand that while suggestions are welcome and the Board of Selectmen can put something on the warrant on its own initiative or not, in order to submit something that is assured of getting on the warrant, you do need to get the requisite number of signatures for a petition article.
And those signatures differ. The amount of the signatures differ from the annual town meeting to the special town meeting. So you need to be aware of that.
Right, and that's all spelled out in the town bylaws that are posted under the bylaws and regulations page on the town website, which is clickable right in the upper right of the website. And I don't know if Mike, if you want to elaborate further, but I did want to put that out there.
Okay, thanks. Now we're going to head to Article G. Anticipated town meeting warrant articles.
So I've put a list in front of you. Some of these we know will come in. Others, as noted, are subject to recommendations of others. So I've included for your reference all 6 items that have been submitted for capital committee review. and all 5 items that have been submitted through the CPC process. But all of those, of course, are subject to the recommendation of their respective committees. We have a list of, looks like about a dozen others. I didn't include all the backup because I think at this point, each of you know what I'm talking about with this, but if not, or if you have questions, now's a good time.
Angus, because I just saw this recently. I didn't know about the paid school fire alarm. I thought we had done all the fire alarm there.
We did. Yeah, and the Capital Committee, we explained this in detail when we met with them a couple of weeks ago, but what happened is that amount was based on a quote that Chief Dwyer had gotten some time ago, and it was reasonably accurate. But what happened is once the funds were approved, then Wayne got more involved. He met with a vendor. They met on site, I think at least 3 times, walking through the building in detail. And there were a couple of things that pushed the project cost higher. One was the need that with the COVID impacts, I mean, you would always want to schedule the fire alarm replacement work around the schedule of school and the children's castle hours of operation. But with COVID, that really became an imperative. And so that means scheduling the work on the late shift. So like the 4, and normally I think that'd be like 3 to 11, but they had to go 4 to 12 because they needed to not arrive until after all of the kids are gone. So when Dwyer had gotten the initial estimate, they hadn't factored in things like doing the work, in the 4 to midnight shift. So that drove costs higher.
Would that be CARES affectable?
You mean, that's
in other words,
yeah, no, I understand. The incremental costs. Yeah.
Because the costs were driven higher by the fact of.
That's a good question. That's a great question to ask. We can send that. Yeah. And we'll see. I mean, if it can be specifically kind of documented that was what drove it. I mean, similar to, you remember.
I mean, you could think of it as like overtime that people had to do because of, the emergency people had to do overtime because of COVID. You could stretch the point slightly that this is the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So what they did, so the funds, so this all came up last fall when we were working toward the contract, and realized that there just wasn't going to be enough in the approved funding to do the full project. So it was determined that this control panel could be carved out and done separately, and so that decision was made. Let's see, in the the command center, which you see on page 40 of your packet. So that was left out of the contract with the goal of seeking supplemental funding.
Okay, so it wasn't like something that got forgotten. That's what I was.
No, it really was the COVID impact on the scheduling. But I will say that the amount of time that Wayne spent and the vendor spent, with Chief Dwyer in the summer and fall leading up to the contract. I mean, this is a $300,000 project. It was dozens of hours. I think Wayne estimated it was probably over 40 hours of time by the vendor. And he said, like, they would not have spent that time before the funds were appropriated. Once the funds are authorized, then they're going to put in time to work out those details. But he said, if you're on spec and you haven't gotten the town meeting funding yet, the vendor's not going to put in, 40 plus hours of skilled, high value labor just to work out every little detail. So I want to be clear that, I think what it comes down to, I mean, you could say could this have been known when the proposal was initially put forward? And I think, you know, this kind of ties into if department heads in preparing these capital requests are incentivized to keep the number as low as possible, they're probably not going to build in enough contingency. And that's where I know the way Wayne looks at some of these projects is if he thinks it's going to be 304, he's probably going to ask for 320 or 330 because he knows from being in this business 30 years, there's things that come up. Whereas I think, you know, when this was brought forward a couple of years ago, I think it was brought forward with not a lot of space above what the vendor had quoted. So it wasn't until we got to the contracting stage and the walkthroughs and, you know, and actually meeting with the director of the Children's Castle and, you know, making sure that the work was scheduled totally outside, not just the operation, but the drop-off hours. Those are the kind of details that, you know, it's hard. I mean, you know, again, if Chief Dwyer was only doing one project, like maybe, but, you know, it's,
We've talked enough. I don't want to belabor the point. I was just curious if it was a new thing or whatever, and it's not. Okay.
Yeah. So, so you've got, you know, that list. One thing I'll just note, you know, the stormwater bylaw, we're working on that. Leah has gotten the support of her board to put some time toward that, which is really good because there's nobody else with any time for that. If that comes together and if we're happy with it, we'll recommend it. If it doesn't come together, we do need to show some progress this year with our MS4 permit with EPA. But if it's not ready, it's not ready. So we'll see if we can get that stormwater bylaw ready.
Sort of on the same line, the asked for amount for the new pumper is 500,000. So I know fire trucks are very customized items. Is that a hard number? Is that just like, well, it's as close as we can come? I mean, that's a huge chunk of money, and so we don't want to be in the situation where the same kind of thing. We don't want to be in a situation where the fire truck is actually 560 or something like that. That's my only comment about that.
Chief Dwyer was at the last capital improvements committee meeting, and I think that number is fairly solid number, Archie.
Okay.
You know, he explained that, you know, there's sort of three different levels you can go. There's the baseline level, which might not fit the need, and then there's a sort of standard product, which is, I think, what we're looking at now. And then, as you had suggested, you can pull out all the stops and you can spend a lot more money and get something that's highly customized. And that's not what we're doing here. So
okay,
he seemed pretty confident that was a reasonable number. Is that your recollection too, Angus?
It is, but I also would note, and you know, we'll talk more about this at the meeting coming up on Wednesday night with the capital committee. And I don't want to get ahead of the chief on this, but I do think that you know, one of the questions that came up at the last meeting is, you know, there's this, but there's also the tanker truck replacement is also on the capital program. It's not proposed for FY22, but it's proposed in the relatively near term, and that's another 500,000. So the capital committee asked at the last meeting, do we need both of those trucks? Is there a way that a single truck could satisfy both needs? And I do know the chief has done some additional research on that, and I think he said there would be a truck in the $700,000 to $800,000 range, which if they did that could basically be replace both trucks. So he'll speak further about that on Wednesday. I haven't gotten anything you know, in writing on that, but that's something that the capital committee is looking really closely at that expenditure, as you would expect with something with that dollar figure.
In the past, the purchase of the fire trucks were from state bid lists. So, these are things that have already been bid out by the other communities, by the state. So I'd assume that the pricing is pretty close, so, and that's how we've done in the past.
Archie, the capital committee got an enormous amount of backup in their last packet. I'm happy to send that to you and Glenn. I know it went to Rick as a member of that committee, but I can send that to you and Glenn. I wouldn't necessarily send that until it's actually proposed by capital committee, and then the selectmen would do its own review in detail. But given the amount of money, I'll just send you everything that was sent to them, because I know Chief Dwyer did send, tens of megabytes worth of backup on that item.
Okay.
Well, on a couple of his items.
Yeah, there were three different, Mike, sort of along the lines of what you were saying. There were actually three different vendors mentioned that were all state approved. The chief had chosen one, but he showed documentation for products from three different vendors, all on the state approval list.
Okay, I won't hold us up about any more of these at the moment. They're obviously in flux at the moment. I just had those few big questions.
Oh, hey, one thing I did want to specifically reference that I put under the potential, but I would look to the selectmen to see if you agree this would make sense, and if so, then I'd work with Mike on the specific language. But this is
okay. So this is on page 28, everybody.
28, the first one, that adopt the MGL to authorize tax payment agreements. So there's a specific Mass General law that authorizes the treasurer collector to enter into payment agreements. And while we have not had a lot of payment agreements in town, in any given tax year, there might be, between 4 and 8 that the former treasurer collector did do. And that's been the kind of the custom over many years. Really, that's supposed to have the state authorization. So in working with the new treasurer collector, this came up as something that we would recommend, that if that is going to be the policy of the town to entertain a payment agreement with individual taxpayers, that be specifically authorized by opting into that MGL.
To me, it seems like if it isn't, it doesn't seem like something that would be overly we don't obviously want. It doesn't seem like something to be overly contentious. People are not going to want, special treatment or individualized treatment depending upon who the person is. So if it's categorized as this is the rule and that's the way it is, I don't see how anyone could object to that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, in that situation, by the end of the tax year, people are whole. They've paid their taxes in full by the end of the tax year. What it does is it allows them to space it out into, and it can be customized, but it could be monthly or it could be, bi-monthly, that by the end of the year, they're paid in full. And in exchange for that, the fact that technically their last payment may not arrive right on time, that the town agrees is not going to foreclose on the property as long as they're proceeding and making the regular payments in accordance with the payment plan.
So Angus, if you look at page 51, that's
yes.
Okay, so is this taken verbatim from the Mass General law, or what is this?
So the policy language on page 52 and Caitlin's memo on page, it actually was added after the fact, so it doesn't have a page number. I dropped it in after I'd put in the page numbers. But if you see on page 54 is the excerpt from the Mass Collector and Treasurer Association manual for treasurers, and page 55 of the packet is the actual MGL. What begins on page 51 is the Department of Revenue community compact policy on tax enforcement.
Okay.
This is one that's on the list that we've kind of been chipping away at. And with Caitlin here, working with her, we both agreed that it's in the town's interest and certainly in her interest to have a clear policy on tax enforcement, so that things are done uniformly, everybody's treated the same, and that there's policy to back that up, because it can seem, obviously no one wants to be put in tax title. No one wants to get these demand letters that says that, if they don't pay by such and such a date, their name's going to be put in the newspaper. No one wants to get those letters. And it's it's one of the more difficult parts of the job of the treasurer collector. So having a policy to prescribe that actually is better for the staff person, because then, it's not a discretionary judgment they're making. They're simply enforcing the law.
So which is the chicken and egg? Do we want to pass the agree to the Mass General Law at town meeting first and then do the policy?
Well, the only portion of the policy that relates to this MGL is Section E. So if you did adopt the policy tonight, I would recommend you do so without Section E and then go back and amend it later, because the entire rest of the policy is simply enumerating what the law says anyway.
Okay.
And we can do, when that comes up, we can talk about, do you want to do that tonight or do you want to wait? It's honestly fine. I did want to make you aware of it because we are, as we're working with the new treasurer collector, she is going to be sending out some of those demand notices. And if payments aren't received, putting people's names in the paper. And that's obviously, it's a tough part of the job. So I just want to kind of put that on the table, that's something we're working on. I can send you more details.
Okay, so we could adopt this policy ahead of things.
Is this real estate taxes?
Yes.
Is this just real estate taxes? Or is this
just real estate taxes?
What about, okay, right. I don't know what anybody else thinks about it. I had no problem with any of the verbiage of this except for the very last sentence on page 51. I don't know what "from this point forward" means. From what point forward?
Basically, once it's publicly noticed, once it's, once that demand is published in the paper.
Okay, it just seemed vague. I just didn't quite get that one, that's all.
Archie, I think it was in the context of that entire paragraph. It says the treasurer collector will send at least one enforcement letter. And I think it's from that point, from the initiation of that paragraph forward, the only way to settle it is to pay cash certified check or cashier's check, as in you can't send a personal check at that point.
Okay.
That was the way I read it, at least.
That's right.
So, I don't know. I don't have. It seems like we should have a policy, and I'm in agreement with it, but I'm just me. I don't know what anyone else thinks about it. Glenn, what do you think?
Glenn's muted. I'm good with it, Archie. Glenn's off now, but
yeah. I feel fine, especially if we have a new treasurer collector and this is going to make her job, I don't know if she requested it or by looking at the job realized we don't have something like this. I think it's a good way to support her, in a management way of saying, put things off of her, I think it's great. I think that's kind of how it kind of came about, Angus? It sounds like it with your explanation.
That's right. And in practice, we take every practical step before getting to that point of, putting it in the newspaper. As a courtesy, we send a letter before that demand notice. So people are really given every reasonable accommodation, but there is a point at which, in the town's interest and to secure the town's interest, you need to proceed timely and at some point put properties into tax title. And at that point, once a certain amount of time passes, the town does have the right to foreclose on property.
I didn't mean to take things out of order, but I thought those things were
Yeah,
sort of related.
Yeah. So
I'd make a
put on
motion
that
to
list.
approve the policy on the tax enforcement as written on page 51 and 52,
Second, Kemper.
with the exception of our part E.
Okay. Yep. Second, Kemper.
So regarding Part E, how do we have to circle back around at a later date then and get back to that.
Yep, that's right. We would, if town meeting adopts the MGL, we would bring back a recommendation to amend the policy to incorporate that section E. With that said, I do want to make really crystal clear, the payment agreements that are already in place, we will continue to honor those. We're not backing out of any prior agreements. We just want to make sure that going forward, those are done in, based on statutory authorization.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could see how for a treasurer collector, it would be pretty difficult, particularly if you know somebody, if you live in town or you have, even if you are a town employee and you don't live in town, but you know people in town, it'd be pretty difficult to deal with a situation on a one-by-one basis if you know of people,
That's exactly right.
Yeah, right. And it really needs to be an even playing field for everybody.
Then you can always fall back on, well, I'm not being extra hard on you. I'm just doing what it says.
Right. And I will say that very often in my experience and in Caitlin's, those earlier letters before it gets to the point of putting someone's name in the paper, typically are, you might solve 3/4 of your issues that way. And often people will come up with the money to avoid, having their account published.
Yeah.
All right. So I forget who did I made the motion.
You made a motion, Glenn seconded. Yeah.
Okay. Further discussion, all in favor, Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
Great.
Thank you. And I will say, as you know, this is great for our audit as well, and for our eventual, when we get to bond rating, showing approved policies is very helpful as well.
Good. Okay. Our next item, I'm going to hand this one pretty much off to you, Angus. These are complicated, but basically work done by, and I would commend them on it. The planning board is coming up, and Leah coming up with some interim regulations relating to the housing fund money that we received. And if we do develop a housing trust, this would be at least a way for the town to be able to tap some of that money to deal with affordable housing that could be the responsibility of the town and particularly the town manager. So, okay, Angus, it's your ball now.
Good. Okay. So, yeah, the zoning bylaw does provide the ability for the planning board to require contribution into these affordable housing fund. And so that's been happening for a few years, and the balance now is over $100,000. But any use of that fund shall be governed according to the bylaw by regulations promulgated by the planning board and approved by the Board of Selectmen. So that's something that just didn't happen over the years, and that's what's before you tonight. And it has been really a surprising amount of work for Leah's office, for my office, and for Mike McCarron, but we're all very happy with the draft that's in front of you. And what it basically does is it unlocks the use of those funds. And the most pressing need is to ensure that we're in full compliance with the regulatory agreements on the various affordable housing units in town. There's reporting, there's enforcement, and most particularly, or most kind of the biggest time impact is on resale, if any, or when those units are sold. There's quite a lot of red tape associated with tenant selection, running a lottery, marketing it throughout the region, sending all documentation of every bit of that to the state. It's an incredibly time-intensive process. And so communities our size, and actually even 10 times our size, often rely on consultants who are specialized in pre-qualifying people, certifying people's income and assets, those kinds of things. And so that the intended use, the primary intended use of this fund, at least in the near term, would be to engage consultant support on an as-needed basis to make sure that we're in full compliance with our obligations. Because when these affordable units have been created, the planning board does that through their permitting, but it's ultimately the Board of Selectmen and my office who are the monitoring agent. So it every time they create even a single unit, that creates a really very substantial workload for our office. And so this fund can help make sure that we have the resources to carry that out responsibly. It does also allow, as an eligible use of the funds, any technical support that we may need to establish an affordable housing trust, which I think many people agree is the right thing to do. But that's a somewhat longer term objective. That could be something maybe next fall that we would propose, or even the following spring, but not this spring. And there's reasons for that I could get into, but I think having, I've worked with affordable housing trusts, and I think having some hand-holding to make sure that before we do that, that we go into it with eyes wide open, and we set it up properly and resource it properly is going to be really important. So that's why
So Angus, if we're good with this, can this go into effect now?
Yep. The planning board's already voted it, and with the language in the bylaw, it's kind of awkward language, but basically it requires both boards to approve it. So planning board's approved it. So if you approve it, then it would take effect, and then those funds would be available up to a maximum of $10,000 in any given fiscal year. That would be expendable under my authority. And if for whatever reason more than that was needed in any given fiscal year, I would need the written approval of the Board of Selectmen indicating the nature and cost of the proposed work.
So I have one question on this from reading through it. So page 48 of the packet. It's actually page 2 of the policy, and it's I'll give you exactly where it is. D1BI, where it reads, manage the resale process, calculate maximum resale price, market the unit, qualify eligible buyers, and then what I have highlighted is manage process if an eligible buyer is not located. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure what that means at that point. I don't know what that process is.
So I'll speak to that, and then McCarran, you might want to supplement. But to me, that's kind of the nightmare scenario. Yeah. Because the way these, deed restrictions are written is, when the unit is resold, there is a finite amount of time to find an eligible and qualified buyer. And by eligible and qualified, I mean, eligibility is meeting the income and asset requirements. Qualified means they can get a mortgage and they can buy it. So it can be really difficult to find someone who's meets both of those requirements. But there's a finite time for that. It's not an open-ended restriction. And if you can't find a qualified buyer, the town does have the right of first refusal to then purchase the unit, which would be the town's last recourse to keep that unit affordable. And I say nightmare scenario because the nightmare would be if any of these affordable units lapsed to become a market rate unit because an eligible and qualified buyer wasn't found. So when I see the language manage the process if an eligible buyer is not located, I read that to mean potentially bring a proposal to town meeting to buy the unit as the town. I hope it never comes to that. But Mike, is that?
Yeah, you're correct. But the other aspect of it is if the town doesn't purchase it, if, of course, we could also find maybe another housing entity, to purchase it if they have the money. But if it is sold as a market unit, someone has to, go through the process to determine that any excess of what the property is sold for versus what the affordable rate would be is actually taken, from the closing and distributed to the town. So that if you lose an affordable unit, you should at least get the difference in cash of, between what the affordable rate should be and what it's actually sold for. So that's the other aspect of it that could also happen, which needs to have somebody, because you need somebody on top of it in order to make sure that the sale and everything else is done absolutely according to, the correct procedure and to the best interest of the town.
It's right here.
So, I don't want to go too far off in the weeds here, but I'm just curious. So, with an affordable unit, when it's being resold, is a representative of the town or of the town's agent at the closing to make sure that that something doesn't slip by and somebody makes $250,000 on their affordable unit and is out of town?
I haven't been on one of those, but the thing is, this is all of record.
Yeah.
And if it weren't followed, then theoretically, I think that the town would have the right to go against the unit, meaning it wouldn't be clear title.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless this is, taking place. And there is a restrictive covenant on there that has to be complied with, in order to get good title to this property.
Yeah.
So they'd have to come to at that point, they have to come to the town anyways. I mean, that's the whole idea of the process.
Yeah.
To see that it's, before they can transfer, that it's been complied with.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And it's really not pie in the sky, because to qualify to get a mortgage and to qualify for these affordable housing is people who just generally don't have the down payment. And, so affordable housings could sit there if they needed to be sold. Affordable housing in the beginning, it was supposed to be for rentals. It's a lot easier for people to have affordable rentals. It's hard for people to, to get mortgages and still qualify under the terms of affordable housing. Just the ones behind the Legion, I think, were going for the affordable aspects were going for like 170 something. And the other ones were going for 160. So hypothetically, if one of those did not get sold affordable and then sold for 500, we would get the, from 170, and then we would get, just say 500 minus 170, we would get that money. Correct?
I agree with everything you said, Glenn. It's something not a lot of people, this whole issue of the affordable housing policy, and, it was intended or it was designed for rental, and it's a tough fit for the ownership. With that said, I've seen it work, and I've seen people get into units they wouldn't have ever been able to buy. And it's been I've seen some real success stories. So it can work, but it's threading the needle, especially, since the mortgage crisis and with the difficulty of people qualifying for mortgages, when they meet those income and asset limitations, it's difficult to then also qualify for a mortgage.
The other advantage of hiring people who are expert in this process is that they maintain lists of people who are qualified buyers. And as soon as they get, they send it out. So whereas the town, would have a limited ability to advertise or get to these people to know that this is available, these other organizations, collect as much information as possible, because they run these lotteries in which they get the recommendations. So they already have, a list of potential buyers, to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's
I think
one
it's
of the
very-
advantages.
I think it's very important for everybody to understand, this is not creating any more affordable housing at all. It's just helping the town manage what we already have.
Exactly.
And it's something that we don't have the time nor expertise to do it.
No,
Right.
and
And it
that's
might,
what this
you know,
one,
it might come up once every couple of years. And so even if you have the expertise, you probably don't have the time. And even if you develop the expertise, when it comes up again a couple of years later, it's a whole, it's
Have
your
to learn it all again.
curve. So instead of hiring someone who deals with this day in and day out. And so it's great. I really am, obviously still need the board to vote this tonight, but I will say that getting these regs in place has been something we've been talking about for years. And so it's going to really be good to.
why can't we vote it?
Sorry?
Why can't we vote it tonight?
Go for it. Make a
Go
motion.
for
I don't have it in front of me. So does it have to be word for word, or can I just say the affordable housing bylaw?
Glenn, I've got it in front of me. You want me to read it? Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Rick.
So, I move that we accept the interim regulations for housing contribution payments and resale fees pursuant to section 5.f.8 of the West Newbury zoning bylaw, inclusionary zoning.
Second,
All in favor, Archibald, aye.
Kemper, aye.
Parker, aye.
This is a big help. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank the planning board for their.
Yeah, thanks for pushing this through.
Absolutely.
I know this has been hanging out there for ages, so thanks for pushing it through.
Where are we at? Tax enforcement, we did approve the RFQ for the lease of the Children's Castle. The lease for the Children's Castle by the Commonwealth, we need to put this out for bid basically every so often. We're using a town resource that has to be accessible to anyone that wants to bid on it. So
RFQ.
I haven't got the thing in front of me.
I thought Rick
We
did.
No, I have it here. But I think essentially, Archie, was that anything, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but anything above $35,000 needs to go out, needs an RFP or an RFQ put out. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
But
And-
in this circumstance, we're using the process of a request for qualifications.
Okay.
The board is setting a lease rate, and we're submitting it. We're looking for quality daycare providers, and that a selection committee will choose a potential tenant based upon a list of criteria, which are set forth, so that we get the best provider and that for the property.
Yeah. So, and I think it's perhaps important that people understand that this isn't the town going out intentionally looking for a new, for a new tenant for a children's castle. In fact, we're quite satisfied, I think I can say, but we're required to do this statutorily. So,
Right.
Exactly. Very, very good point, Rick.
I'll just read the motion, and unless anybody had anything else to add. Okay, I move that the town proceed with a request for qualifications for leasing a portion of the John C. Page School to a quality daycare provider for 3 years with a monthly rent commencing April 1st, 2021 at $12,078 per month for the first year, $12,320 per month for the second year, and $12,566 per month for the third year.
Second,
All in favor?
Kemper,
Archibald,
aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you.
Final note is we have a Form 500 from Verizon Corporation. And basically, it's complaints and service problems that the utility has received and their response to them. And This is the report that has come back to the town. I don't have any comments.
No comments.
Okay. A couple of reports from Angus. Updates.
The Middle Street Bridge, as you know from prior meetings, it's now fully into the permitting process. So the Wayne and I both attended the Concom initial hearing last Monday, and nothing unexpected. They had some questions. I think the consultants, BSC Group, did a nice job fielding the questions. The commission did request a site visit, so that'll take place this coming Sunday, February 7th at 9 a.m. And they continued the hearing to the following Monday, a week from tonight, February 8th at 7:30 p.m. So, I mean, there's some detail in there, but unless there's questions, I just wanted to keep you apprised. The Newbury Port Conservation Commission hearing begins tomorrow evening. And if he's not too sleep deprived, I think Wayne is going to be attending that one. I might zoom in as well just to listen in, but you know, where he's got relationships over there, I thought he'd be a better representative for that one. And so, yeah, that's on track. And I've been talking to city staff about the, budgeting for the bridge. Obviously, we're intending to propose our share of the local costs and, want to make sure that the city's going to meet us halfway on that. So that discussion's ongoing.
Angus, is the Zoom details for the Zoom or whatever they use for an app for the Newburyport Concom, is that on their website?
It should be, but if you don't see it, let me know. We can certainly get it for you.
Okay,
If it's not there, it should be.
Okay, I'll probably listen in on that tomorrow.
That's going to be when? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're probably going snorkeling or something, aren't you?
I actually, you're exactly right.
So that's tomorrow, 6:45 p.m.
But the fish are sleeping by 6:45, Archie.
When you keep on saying you're in a different time zone, is it just daylight savings time? What is it? I mean, you're in St. John's. It's like in the same,
No, it's the same as like Nova Scotia, that time zone.
So it's one zone each.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It's 1 hour. Okay. And then you go to Newfoundland, it's a half an hour. Who knows that? But whatever.
Right. Those Newfies,
Yeah, crazy. Okay.
That's what they say up there.
Yeah. Is that it?
So the Soldiers and Sailors, similar. Of course, that's in design, not permitting. But we did have a good meeting last week with the local permitting personnel. Just we're trying to sound out any issues. We don't want any surprises there, and we want to make sure that the architects are in a position to put the design out for construction bids on the timeline. And so we need to make sure that if there's any conditions that are going to be coming out of site plan review or Concom, that we get those kind of on the table sooner than later. I will say the contractors, including the engineering sub, continually scratched his head over the requirement for site plan review. There's no change to the footprint. There's no real change in use because it's being designed for public assembly and public meeting space. It really already was that. They really asked the question like 4 different times, like, does it really need site plan review? And the answer kept coming back, yes. So, that's our bylaw. So anyhow.
God bless America.
Well, maybe that, I don't know. I mean, there's clearly site issues to be dealt with there. I don't, you're right. I mean, we're not moving a building or anything or building a building, but certainly there are site constraints there.
Right, but those are things the building permit, the building inspector, he's got to make sure the drainage works and that it's ADA compliant, and it's anyhow, they'll go to the planning board. It's fine, but
it just eats up more money and more time.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey,
So.
Is that it?
So, yeah, well, the issue of the site work and what exactly was agreed between this board and Cottage
Yep.
Advisors, that's something that's, we're gonna bring forward at a future meeting to have an updated plan of reference that is binding, because it's not.
Can we sort of monetize what we had asked for before, so that again it can be put in escrow, that we use it when we actually need it?
That would be ideal, and we've definitely talked about that amongst ourselves, but we could certainly propose that. That would be,
Okay.
I think that would be in everybody's interest.
It might even be more agreeable to Chip, as the thing is, they didn't have to keep thinking about it.
Yeah, no, you're right, Archie. I mean, I would be surprised if he wasn't happy to just, come up with a reasonable sum, an agreeable sum, and wipe his hands of it. And
Right.
That would be better for us too, because then we wouldn't have to be negotiating, debating.
Whatever it is, I'd like to make sure it's cemented, because I don't want this to be, when we mentioned it, I thought about it in the back of my head, but I didn't realize we were going to talk about it. Hey, Archie, is somebody sleeping in your house? You're talking off a low now.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Okay, is that it?
So other updates, there was just one thing I wanted to ask you about. We were contacted by Greenbelt regarding potential location for parking for the River Road land. And I can put this on the February 22nd agenda to look at in more detail. Dave Rimmer it would be happy to be there that night remotely, but they're going to engage an engineer to work up a detailed proposal, which is going to need to be submitted to Concom with a notice of intent. And so he and I have been corresponding and agreed it would be good to just let the Board of Selectmen know this is underway, because when a notice of intent is eventually filed, it'll be partly on land under your control as the highway commissioners. So there's going to be an opportunity at that time for this board to formally sponsor that notice of intent. So that's not what I'm asking you tonight, but I did want to at least share with you the concept map that you see on page 75, and that roughly shows where the parking would be, just to make sure that you're generally in agreement with the direction. And if you did have any specific guidance or direction that you wanted to provide, that Greenbelt could then tell their engineer to take that into account in the specific design.
Do they have the area flagged or anything? Just if we want to take a drive down by there and take a look?
I doubt it.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm sure Dave would be, he could probably meet you out there.
Yeah, has Wayne seen what they want to do yet?
No, this just came in last Wednesday, and I haven't really
yeah.
shopped it around yet.
Okay. Of course, now there's going to be snow covering the ground, so we won't really be able to get as good a idea of the lay of the land.
I just thought it was good that they haven't put it on the back burner, that they're actually thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So as you see in the packet, this would require a couple of votes, the selectmen approval as highway commissioners, as well as Concom notice of intent. And finally, it would be a street opening, so the DPW director has authority over that. So there's plenty of review, but obviously, we're the applicant, so we want to streamline it as much as we can. And so if you do either tonight, or if you think of any specific guidance you'd want the engineer to take into account, just send it my way.
My only comment is we want to, the ultimate thing was that we wanted to have the cars where they'd be, if they got a kayak or whatever, that it would be accessible to the potential area that they were picking for where it's most accessible to the river. So I'm sure they're thinking about that, but it doesn't mention anything about that.
Yeah, well, it does. If you look at the PS in Dave Rimmer's initial email, it says PS phase 2 at the River Road property would be in the future for parking to access the river for car top.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't see that. Okay.
You know, Angus, I would be interested in connecting with Dave Rimmer out there at some point. Just take a look and, you know, talk with them about what they have in mind.
That sounds great. I would just ask that, either if you set that up, that make sure that the other board members are made aware.
Yeah.
As well as, I don't know if Wayne, he'd probably, just let's make sure we're doing it in a coordinated
Sure.
way, but that sounds fine.
Okay. So Archie, you're back at the end of the week. You'll be around next week?
Yeah, if
Well, I don't.
if it's
I don't need to get involved in that. And Rick, you do a lot of that kayaking. You got it. You know what people use, need, and all that kind of stuff. It's right up your alley. So I would go with any recommendations that you'd make.
Thanks. Great. Well, I'll if I do get something set up, I'll let you know.
okay.
And then finally, we did, just that last page of the packet, we did, we have a contract in place. Well, actually, we haven't signed it yet, but it's gone through some reviews for the upgrade of the HVAC at the 1910 building under one of the Green Communities grants. So just wanted to keep you apprised. We haven't signed the contract yet. We got the updated draft on Friday morning. And I know Wayne had gone through that in detail, and Mike and I had both reviewed it. I think we'll give it one more close read before we sign it. But the goal is to get that work started this spring.
So, anything else? Anything we want to put on future agendas?
Good.
Everybody good? Okay.
Great.
And just a
motion to
reminder that the
adjourn.
next meeting is not until 3 weeks from tonight. So that's February 22nd. It's the next.
Archie, I'm sorry. I was muted. I'm sorry. There is something I want to put on.
Okay.
All this talk about affordable housing. I'd like to have some serious discussion with this board to rekindle an affordable housing committee in the near future. I know maybe after the budget season goes through, but a really, really constructive in, that we go, whatever, that we set up another committee to try to get some more affordable housing. And that would mean, hybrids, working with builders on town-owned land, doing it ourselves. I don't know, but just let's try to rekindle that committee again. I think enough time has gone past. People, that we maybe try to do it, and maybe the, people now understand the need for it, and then understand the near miss of not doing it with the big project we had on Coffin Street. So I'd like to, in the near future, have a serious discussion about rekindling that committee.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's a good point.
Maybe that will change some people's minds. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we were, we kind of dodged the bullet, I think.
Yep.
And so we need to take that as a warning.
Oh, we didn't dodge a bullet. We dodged a cannonball.
Yeah, but just think about that. And I look at it. Yeah, the size of that development there. But what we didn't dodge is that affordable housing aspect for people who really need it. That needs to be thought about. That, because it didn't go through, is that affordable housing that is needed in this state and in this town is not going to be available. And so we need to try to do it again. And at least we're trying. That was all.
Okay, that's good.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Stay safe, Archie. Good luck.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Well, everybody stay safe,
Thanks.
but